Welcome, listeners, to another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love, hosted by Richard Osler. My guests on today's podcast are two brave women talking about their new book at Deseret Book. The name of the book is Healing After Sexual Abuse, a Latter-day Saint Perspective. And the authors who are on the podcast are my new friends, Shirley Washenko. Did I say that right, Shirley?
Washenko.
Washenko.
It is a hard one. Yes.
Washenko. We didn't practice that before we went live. And Sage Williams, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. We're eager to be here.
This is a subject, listeners, that we've tried to address at times on this podcast. Sexual assault, sexual abuse survivors have stepped forward and share their stories. On our website, Listen, Learn, and Love, you can find an index of all of our podcasts, and there is a section for abuse survivors. If you want to listen to more stories, the most recent one we did was a brave woman, Heather Prince, 784, talks about being a sexual assault survivor in the middle of a criminal and legal trial with Dr. Broadbent in Utah County. But let me introduce our guests for today. Let me start with Shirley Washenko, who lives in Pennsylvania and has two kids. I'm just going to look at the book because there's a wonderful section at the end that's just a little bit about their bio. She is a married mother of two, as I may have mentioned. She served a mission in Taiwan. They're the parents of two wonderful children. Shirley received both her undergraduate and a graduate degree in piano performance at BYU, and she's the owner and founder of an online piano studio that serves students globally. So way to use your skills in music to bless others. And thanks for being willing to talk about your story as a survivor of child sexual abuse. I assume you never thought you'd do this, Shirley, and here you are writing books and talking about it.
It is a humbling place for sure.
Super brave.
So thankful.
Sage Williams has spent her professional career understanding, preventing, and responding to sexual violence. She was a victim's advocate at the Utah County Sexual Assault Response Team, and upon graduation, she worked as a forensic pediatric nurse for Children's Justice Center. Then she paused her doctoral studies to obtain a Master's of Science in International Health Policy from London School of Economics and Political Science. And then I'm going to read a little bit more. In 2021, Sage co-chaired Harvard University's Interfaith and Interdisciplinary Symposium, Faith and Flourishing, Strategies for Preventing and Healing Child Sexual Abuse. Sage sincerely believes Latter-day Saints, empowered by the gospel of Jesus Christ, can bring about significant healing, not only in their personal circles, but also through policy and practices changes that improve systems and accountability and create more effective and comprehensive support for survivors. So, so Sage is going to share her work as an advocate and Shirley as a survivor, and they're going to talk about how they found each other. I may have mentioned this, Shirley lives in Pennsylvania and has two kids, so they didn't grow up together. They didn't meet at BYU together, but it's this beautiful story of coming together. I'm talking about this subject, being exposed to church leadership and voices within the church that recognize the need for do this, and then publish this book that's at Deseret Book. In the show notes, we'll link to their website, healingaftersexualabuse.com, and that's a way that you can contact Sage and Shirley as well as order their book. So we'll put that in the show notes, and they may talk about that during the podcast. But that's my little brief introduction. We said a prayer that you that are listeners, if you're a survivor of sexual abuse and maybe feel like no one's ever walked your road, we just pray with all of our hearts that what Shirley and Sage share to you will help you find hope in your journey. And then if you're a loved one or somebody just wants to have better tools to help somebody walking this road, that what they share with us on this podcast and in their book will help you help them. I wish I'd learned some of these things a long time ago as survivors of sexual abuse came into my life. Some of that happened as a YSA bishop, and it was kind of like a deer in the headlights. Didn't know what to say. It may have even added to their burden with my uninformed opinions. And that was both men and women. that stepped forward and shared some of this. So is that okay for an introduction, Shirley and Sage?
Thank you so much, Richard. Really appreciate it. I just speaking for myself, just feel so humbled and grateful to be here and hopeful that, as you mentioned, that we can share a message that will bring some light and hope for people that we love so much. We want to link arms with you in this journey because it matters so much. I came
just a quick interruption,
personally.
listeners. Just that was Shirley, and Sage and Shirley, since they're females, they're voicing to stay the same. So at the beginning of the podcast, just introduce when you're speaking so our listeners kind of get used to your voices and know who's talking. And that was Shirley. You're still talking, Shirley. I interrupted you.
No, perfect. Thank you so much. Yes, I began a healing journey probably, it was quite a few years ago, and I was really drowning in the reality, honestly, of who I was and didn't want to be, especially as a wife and as a mother, and feeling such desperate need to understand and confront why and how I got to that place, and just to find healing and find help. And I, as you mentioned, was sexually abused by someone I loved and trusted. And it felt so difficult to make sense of my experience in the context of the culture and messaging that I had grown up in. For me, what I got from it was said that believing that forgiving is forgetting, that silence is never speaking of the truth of my experience and pain because it might hurt another, and that is mercy. Silence is mercy. That accountability is punishment, and it's not kind, and it's not Christ-like. That sexual abuse is too horrible to look at and too uncomfortable, and that bringing it to light would bring shame on people that I loved. I wanted to walk a journey with compassion and love and with faith in Jesus Christ, faith that I had developed and come to know him. And it felt complicated. I didn't know how to do that in the context of what is forgiveness? What is honoring my story? What is living with the integrity of who I am and desire to be? And so that's how I came here, just came to know that truly Christ can literally make beauty from ashes. It can feel so much like the messaging in the world around us is that for survivors and perpetrators, that it's hopeless. There isn't a message of Christ. And there's a lot that we hear in the news about survivors and perpetrators. It's constant. And as I growing up would hear those messages, I knew I had been abused. I knew it was serious, but I felt like I had to be silent about it because of all of the implications of talking about it. And that I reached a point where I was like, we cannot keep doing this. We need to share a message of Jesus, that he truly provided the way for healing. And I needed that. I had to walk it. I had to confront those things because of the place that I was in that felt so dark and just drowning in those realities. So that's how I came to do this process, and then met Sage about 4 years ago through her cousin, actually, and just feel so grateful and humbled to have been doing this journey with her for those years.
And
thank you, Shirley.
Maybe I can jump in. This is Sage for your listeners, and to share a little bit about me and how I started this journey. And also, it kind of combines with the why for this book. I have written a little bit about, this is not in the book, but I wrote about my first experience with a survivor of sexual abuse where I understood what was happening on some level. Just because I think probably everyone knows a survivor, they just may not know that they know, right? But this is the first time, and it was actually as a missionary. And I'm just going to read it if that's okay. And I'll just jump in. So on a Friday evening in a busy, and I'll probably cry through all this. On a Friday evening in a busy and frantic emergency room, I stood there stunned and helpless, watching my missionary companion and a ward member giving emotional support to a friend receiving care for sexual assault. And this friend was someone who we were teaching. When we'd visited the friend earlier that evening to share a gospel message, the ward member, herself a survivor, pieced together the friend's attempts to explain her situation. As soon as, and I'll add in, would learn later on that often people don't even have the language to understand what happened. They're not saying I'm a survivor of sexual abuse when they're sharing with someone the first time. And I, it, this ward member is angelic for being able to figure out what was going on so that this friend of ours could receive some care. As soon as the ward member understood the situation, she immediately drove all of us to the nearest hospital so our friend could receive urgent care. Although I stood in the emergency room frozen, I distinctly remember watching as this angelic ward member and my loyal companion attended to our friend. They were a steady, calm, reassuring presence in the midst of chaos. They insisted on being there for her, determined that she not have to experience this part of her journey alone. To an onlooker, the two women in front of me might have appeared insignificant, a short, blonde 19-year-old missionary from Arizona and an even shorter, middle-aged woman who owned a small flower shop in town. But to me, as I watched these women embody Christ-like love, they were two of the greatest ministers our world has known. Later that night, when the ward member dropped us off at our apartment, she had a solemn presence. It was as if her entire soul was mourning for our friend and the suffering she had endured. When we dropped the friend off that night, I tried to reassure her that the gospel of Jesus Christ could help her, but my words felt empty, powerless, and even insensitive. Not knowing how she could apply God's truth in her personal circumstances, I was unable to give her support or vision for the healing that was possible. I believed that God's light could illuminate a healing path for her, but I struggled to bring that light to where she was presently standing. And I'll just say, I remember that feeling of saying, the gospel of Jesus Christ can help you, and it did not feel good because it felt so vague and general and disconnected from what she was really experiencing. So, over the course of the next decade, and through a variety of experiences, I began to learn in depth about the wounds of sexual abuse and about the healing process. The knowledge I've gained is professional and personal, secular and spiritual. My medical training and academic studies have given me new perspectives through which to understand the scriptures. I've learned as a researcher and as a victim's advocate in the criminal justice system. I've learned while working with a crime lab in each of my church callings, and as I worked with juvenile perpetrators of sexual abuse in a juvenile justice secure care center. I've learned while working in large cities and in tiny towns in the United States and in multiple countries around the world. And most importantly, and this is a big why for me in the book, I've learned from people in a variety of settings, in forensic interviews, in conversations with beloved friends and family members, in air-conditioned hallways of church buildings, and under the scorching sun at a refugee camp, with professors at high tables in high places, and with strangers at the park who I meet as I watch my son play. Hundreds of survivors have shared their stories with me, their struggles and their triumphs, and have shared themselves with me, not just their wounds, but also their hope, their compassion, their deep concern for the people they love. I felt inspired, connected, and a sacred awe for who they are. Survivors have so much wisdom and so much for us to learn from. And we need more Latter-day Saint survivors. This is why I'm so excited for this book to be published, because it's many survivors' experiences that we need to learn from. So what you're about to read is the beginning, or what a reader may read is the beginning of the answer to what I began searching for all those years as a missionary, and Shirley on her own journey, and then beautifully our paths crossed and merged. This book is an introduction to what healing with Jesus Christ after sexual abuse can really look like and feel like. Rather than generally bringing more light to the subject of healing, this is our attempt to shine light directly on the path that leads to healing. And so hopefully what a reader experiences from this book is not just that the gospel of Jesus Christ can help, but specifically, like, what can it look like in real life when you're struggling with real relationships that you really care about, and when there are real consequences for living gospel principles that require courage and groundedness and a really secure connection to our heavenly parents, because we're in a world where people don't understand these principles, and many survivors are misjudged when they do live the gospel of Jesus Christ. So, Shirley, what else would you, or Richard, jump in? But I think that's a little overview of why this book for me.
This is Shirley again. I just love what Sage just shared. As I've just come to love and know her really closely the last years, I've felt how much I want every survivor to have a Sage in their lives. I want every survivor to have someone like that. And that's what this book does. She offers a beautiful letter in the afterword. And I told her, this is you walking with each person who reads this. And so thank you, Sage, for being who you are. I guess I would just add to that is we hope that this book communicates with people. I think it can feel so dark and hopeless and so unclear of how to go forward. And we hope that it communicates that you are worth it. You're worth the struggle, you're worth the challenge, and that there is so much good and joy ahead. That is why the Savior came. That is why he experienced his atonement and healed, made healing possible by healing himself, by overcoming all wounds so that we can, and that we are worth it. I think it can feel so much like I'm too broken. This is too much. It's too hard. It's too scary. And it can feel and seem like it's easier to just retreat into the darkness. But you're worth healing. You are worth stepping into the light and truly coming to experience the Savior's touch.
Wow, super powerful. Keep sharing.
We thought, okay, this is Sage again. We thought maybe it'd be helpful to just give a little overview of how the book is structured. So the book is a combination of a narrative that's woven throughout the book, and it's actually a lot of narratives. Actually, I'll just read a little note. So it's a narrative, and then it's combined with body of the text. So you get to kind of journey with a survivor, like with the narrator, through their journey. And this is really powerful because you get to see the process of untangling and understanding, okay, the way I understood this gospel principle, now I'm learning this wasn't quite right. And so now what is this gospel principle and how do I apply it in my life? But I wanted to share the narratives woven throughout the book are real situations experienced by Latter-day Saint survivors. They're a compilation of multiple survivors' experiences, but they are reflective of what like one individual's journey might look like. And so what we did is we reflected on the hundreds of survivors who've shared their stories with us and really deliberately and prayerfully made decisions about which experiences to include based on what we felt would most closely correspond with what people were experiencing. And then we chose to write the narratives in the first person because we just wanted it to be as easy as possible for the reader to read and relate and benefit from it. So it's kind of a combination of real experiences and then a body of the text explaining each of the principles that we talk about. And the approach is there's a BYU devotional about like how we learn truth. And it's from lived experience. It's kind of a 3-tiered approach. Lived experiences, logic or reason, which you could include scientific evidence, clinical evidence, things like that, best practice. And then revelation, which would include scriptures and words of prophets and God's messengers. And so really, we hope that this book is an embodiment of that approach, where you'll find that without the survivor experiences, the body of the text doesn't make as much sense. Like you need it to understand it in a clearer way. And I just shot this out because we've gotten some feedback that people really loved the audiobook. It's Shirley and I so Shirley is reading the survivor narrative representing the survivors who've contributed. And then I'm reading the body of the text. And partially what we want to communicate is not just the content, but the way that we've delivered the content is really important and intentional to us, that survivors and advocates who are then Shirley is also an advocate, but like all of this information is equal. It's all needed. And so you kind of get to experience throughout the book a balance of both, where you kind of weave in and out of the body of the text and the narrative. So just a little overview for anyone listening who's curious about what to expect.
I love that.
Would it be good to share just a few excerpts, Richard? Does that sound okay?
That sounds great,
Okay.
Shirley.
All right, maybe I'll just share one that kind of goes along with this is in the first chapter where we talk about establishing our identity and just the importance of knowing who we are and our value to our heavenly parents, and always needing to come back to that throughout the process of healing that is eternal. I think that is an ongoing process, but says we may wonder if undertaking this journey is really worth it, if we are capable of succeeding, and what we can hope to become as a result of it. As we consider these feelings and questions, the single most important truth to internalize is that even in our darkest and most desperate conditions, we are children of God with innate worth and divine potential. The time, the effort, and even the discomfort required to find real and lasting healing from sexual abuse is worth it, because we are worth it. Because of Jesus Christ, healing is not only possible, but it is the process by which we learn to actualize our divine potential and become our highest, most authentic divine selves. And then it begins with a narrative. I sat with my therapist and wept as I described all the ways I felt broken. It seemed that on every front I was failing to live up to what I thought I should be. I felt distant from God, even unworthy of Him. As I haltingly expressed these thoughts, my therapist responded, "He just wants to be with you. You are heaven to Him." I was taken aback by the simple power of His words. I understood them to mean that even when I felt utterly broken, God saw my divine potential and worth. At my core, I was good and I mattered to Him. I did not have to earn God's love or achieve something great for Him to want to be with me. He wanted to be with me and wanted a good life for me because I was His child. I stopped and wondered, did I really believe this? Could I see innate value and potential within myself? The simple and honest answer was no. As I pondered what being a child of God really meant after that session with my therapist, I realized that I needed to believe in and value myself. Independent of how the people around me saw me, I needed to believe that I was innately good, that I was worth the healing journey, that my voice had value, and that the life I would choose to live really mattered because I mattered. There is an excerpt, I think, of just what expresses how just that desire to and need to know that you matter enough to walk this journey. And I think as survivors of sexual abuse or other trauma or anything that has left us leaving like we want to hide or not really live in the integrity of our full selves, just knowing that God sees you, He knows you, He wants to be with you. You don't have to earn that desire from Him. And how can we live in a way that puts ourselves in places to be with Him? And it's walking this healing journey with Him, with our Savior as our guide.
That's powerful.
So that's kind of that's the beginning and the introduction to entering the journey. And I thought maybe I would just say healing is not linear. And all these things don't happen in like this exact order. And in fact, I think it's probably cyclical, where you learn something and then you go deeper. And but we did try and be really intentional about the order in which we shared things. And I was trying to think about, I maybe have two places. Maybe I'll share one, and then if we have time, I'll share another one. But there are one of the chapters actually that is really meaningful to me is the chapter on anger. I think there's a lot of maybe fear around feeling and connecting with the feeling of anger. And I'll just read a paragraph maybe about why we maybe feel that, and then share a little a little brief example that's really meaningful to me. So anger is an indicator emotion that conveys important information that something is not right. It can convey to us that we are feeling threatened, vulnerable, exposed, shamed, victimized, violated, or unable in our current circumstances to meet important needs, make progress, or remain safe. Ignoring or suppressing anger is a mistake because it is ignoring the warnings and information it is trying to convey. But reacting to anger in an uncontrolled way without understanding it is also a mistake and can be harmful. Um, you'll get a little bit of this in the book, but maybe also in the footnotes. I just think of everything, I think because of my medical training, in terms of our bodies and healing. Our bodies are so divine. Like that is a core belief that I have, a gift from our heavenly parents, and our bodies are designed to feel strong emotions, including anger. And there we share a lot of examples actually about God feeling angry. And I think we are afraid of or sometimes people disconnect from the feeling because they don't want to react harmfully. But kind of taking the approach that it's really important information. An emotion can lead you to important questions to better understand your circumstances. And even, so we share 3 examples where Captain Moroni acted, felt anger, and responded to his anger. And my favorite and the most surprising to me as we were studying and learning to write this book was a time when Captain Moroni made an incorrect assumption, acted on his anger, even though he didn't have all the information. He actually acted incorrectly, or like on he didn't act incorrectly. Sorry, let me correct myself. But he acted on an incorrect assumption, on not the full information. But it was actually through acting that he got more information, and then was able, because his intentions were godly, were with because he went into it with the right intentions, he was able to recalibrate and proceed forward. And so I think one of the things that I hope a survivor, and really anyone reading this book, if we did a good enough job writing specifically to a survivor, if we did a good enough job at teaching the principle, that you can apply it to your life too. Because we'll all experience woundedness in this life and need healing. But I hope actually people feel more motivated to connect with themselves and to listen to the experiences they're having in their body and in their spirit, and learn from those, and act, to feel more empowered to act, but in a way, hopefully, that is aligned with your values as a disciple of Jesus Christ and with your identity as a child of God.
Wow.
Love that, Sage. Thank you. I think along with that is that bringing things to light is the way to do that. Whether it's bringing our feelings to light and really looking at those and confronting those. I think for me, I was so afraid to look at the potential of wounds that I had. It felt so scary. And what could I do if I, had repercussions from my experience? What could I do about it? And so it felt very scary to look, and who would be impacted if I started to voice that. But to change that to understanding that when I brought light to my experience within myself, when I looked at myself and confronted myself, what was really going on inside of me, and then that was the only way to begin healing, to begin change, to begin becoming. And that impacts everyone around us. We can't decide how people respond. We can't decide if for somebody else, if they're going to choose to respond with fear. And that can be painful. People's responses can hurt. And yet, only in bringing things to light can people around us heal as well. For our perpetrator, for our families, for our communities, nothing in darkness we can only fix what we see. We can only heal what we can see. And again, going back to Sage's, our body's wounds, right? We have to look at the full wound and understand it in order to be able to address what is needed. And I think in the light of sexual abuse, that can feel really scary. And so just knowing that you're worth it and that there is hope. And like Sage said, it is not linear. She knows very well. I'm still very much walking this journey myself. The messiness of it, the complexity of it, it is not over. But it is, there is so much beauty and so much power in knowing that there is hope, that there is healing, and being able to experience the difficult things and know there's a different way forward. I don't have to be afraid of it. I'll just share one excerpt that I love here. This is actually in the last chapter of the book that talks about the healing journey. And it says, the beautiful thing about healing is that light brightens everything around it. When we heal, others see the glory of God in us, which awakens in their souls a reminder of the divinity within them. The more we walk the healing journey ourselves, the more we become like the Savior, healers who can love, care for, and inspire others in eternity-changing ways. And I just love that reminder that healing, any healing act that we do, brings light and goodness to the world around us. And though we cannot control or decide how others respond, that light and goodness is not dimmed by that. It impacts and inspires and can help others because we can start to walk journeys with them.
Listening to Shirley made me think of something that I've learned a lot from Shirley, actually, which is one of the reasons why a connection to God and like experiencing our identity as a child of God is so powerful is because we can't control how other people respond when we bring something to light. And that can feel really scary. And if we're dependent on external validation of other people, we may not choose to move forward in a healing journey because it's so scary. It's so scary to experience misjudgment or rejection. And it's something I really admire about Shirley is just her rootedness to like her identity as a child of God, that she'll always experience belonging with our heavenly parents and with the Savior Jesus Christ, even as the world around her changes and shifts, which is scary. It's unfamiliar. And yeah, it's just actually, I thought of a narrative that is at the end, or not quite at the end. It's actually at the end of a chapter that I love called It Takes an Angel to Speak the Truth. And an angel is in quotation marks because we're building off of the story of Alma. But this is a survivor sharing, and I really, really love it because I think it also communicates the challenge and the struggle. So this is someone who decided to share their story. And they said, like Jacob, who felt weighed down by his call to speak difficult truths to the people he loved, I too can feel weighed down by the call I feel to speak truths that I know feel difficult to the people I love. And like Jacob, it often grieveth my soul to speak with so much boldness. Even though it's hard, I choose to speak the truth because of the meaningful and lasting connection I desire in my relationships. When I'm tempted to minimize my feelings and downplay the consequences of being a sexual abuse survivor for fear of being judged as weak and overly sensitive, I find a lot of comfort in Jacob's words reminding me that exceedingly tender feelings are pleasing unto God. I remember that is because of my feelings of love that I'm able to hold multiple truths together simultaneously and speak honestly about the stark present reality and the hope of the future possibilities. When I remember this, I also remember who I am striving to become, and this fills me with courage to keep moving forward. Anyways, there's just so many beautiful lessons that we can learn from exactly what you're saying, Richard, when you introduced Shirley, which is really courageous and faith-filled people who are living the gospel of Jesus Christ in real life, like in their lives. And actually, if we have time, I really wanted to share just a little bit about the chapter on forgiveness.
Good, go for it.
Because this is a chapter, or this is a principle that I want to be really careful about saying this well, but has been misunderstood, I think, and misapplied and weaponized against survivors quite a lot. And so the beginning of the chapter is actually deconstructing some misbeliefs about forgiveness. And there are 4 of them, and they come directly from a quote from Elder Anderson. And I just want to share the 4 of them to give you a sense of, first, we start with what forgiveness is not. And just to give you a sense of the chapter, this honestly has been one of the a really powerful chapter in my own, I'm not a survivor, but in my own life of learning, what does forgiveness actually look like when you're also trying to live the truth and not minimize reality either. We worship a God of truth. And so what does healing really look like in this context? So, okay, the first thing is forgiveness is not excusing accountability or failing to protect oneself or others from further harm. This means that forgiveness is fully compatible with acknowledging the severity of the wounds inflicted and taking appropriate actions to connect individuals who perpetrated sexual abuse to the real consequences of their actions. I'll just read like a little snippet from each of the 4. Second, forgiveness is not continuing a relationship with someone who's not trustworthy. This means that re-entering a relationship with an individual who perpetrated sexual abuse is not an indicator that the survivor has forgiven. In some cases, this could actually be a continuation of the abuse. It also means that survivors of sexual abuse who establish firm boundaries and choose to separate themselves from the perpetrator may have fully forgiven the perpetrator. Then we go into a lot of detail about that one. But then the third, forgiveness is not dismissing the hurt or disgust we feel. That's a direct quote from Elder Anderson, by the way. This means that forgiveness does not mean that we do not feel anger, pain, or grief. Forgiveness is not repressing or denying the strong emotions that are evoked in our souls when our worth as divine children of God is violated. Forgiveness does not require disconnecting from ourselves, including our feelings, and the truth of our experiences. And then fourth, forgiveness is not forgetting, but remembering in peace. The old adage, forgive and forget, is not scriptural or doctrinal. And all of this is footnoted in case anything made a listener feel uncomfortable. Like, wait, that's what I thought forgiveness was. So then we, through the narrative, it's kind of like, okay, so all the things I thought forgiveness was is not forgiveness. So then what is forgiveness? And the rest of the chapter goes into, we reference the word most often used by the Savior in the Greek translation of the New Testament, which means to set at a distance, to set loose, or to set free. And we talk about how forgiveness is setting ourselves free from a life of endlessly managing the pain of festering wounds by choosing to courageously step out of familiarity and into the unknown healing journey. Like every step of healing is a step of forgiveness.
I might just briefly share something that feels so valuable to me is learning about the principle of agency. I think previously you can often hear things like, oh, that darn agency that, that this person used their agency to damage and hurt. And that's true, right? But sometimes it can create this negative experience with agency, like that it's what causes the damage, or that our relationship with it is that it's a negative thing. And it's so empowering as a survivor because we hear so often that hurt people, right? That is, and it's true. That is very true. And so as a survivor, wondering how I'm just hurting people, right? That was that place that I felt myself in, drowning in who I was. How can I stop this perpetuating this hurt, and not sexual abuse, right? But all of the ways that we can damage and hurt other people, and coming to understand that agency was preserved and gifted by our Savior, Jesus Christ, so that we could heal, so that we could stop perpetuating hurt, so that hurt people don't have to keep hurting people. And just so empowering to know that and feel that as a survivor, because it can feel hopeless. So just a little quote here. Instead of being forever victim to the destructive impacts of sexual abuse, embracing our agency is the significant healing force and power within us to grow into everything we are capable of becoming. And then in the narrative, says, I distinctly remember receiving a letter from my perpetrator one day that led to an epiphany. In the letter, it was clear he felt that anyone in his same circumstances would have done what he did. He was saying, in essence, what I had often heard, that hurt people hurt people. This statement contains some truth, and it is a perspective that has helped me extend compassion alongside accountability to myself and to others when we make choices that inflict pain. But as I read his words, I was struck with the realization that this perspective was not the full truth. Because of the gift of agency, hurt people do not have to hurt people. For the first time, I could see that agency was a divine gift I could embrace to heal. Without it, all of us would forever be victims to our circumstances, always being acted upon. Now I could see that by choosing to embark on the healing journey, I could break free from the cycle of perpetuating pain. I saw my journey forward as an incredible opportunity to stop the cycle and to become who I knew I had been created to be. So just empowering to know we can choose to walk this journey. We're worth the journey, and we can choose it. We can embrace that agency, and it doesn't negate the challenge or the difficulty or the pain or the messiness of it, but it does empower us to walk it and to be able to become all that we can.
And if I could just jump off of what Shirley said, this is a big theme in the book, is becoming. Sometimes I think we don't honor our agency when we talk about Jesus Christ. We talk about healing like it's something he'll do to us instead of something that we learn to do, and that he created a way for us to learn to do. This is something that has been an epiphany for me, and I've learned so much about Jesus Christ through the process of writing this book, that we talk a lot about how he experienced every wound, like every sin and also every injustice in his atonement. At least for me, I feel like a lot of the time I hear it kind of ends there. Like he experienced everything, so he knows. But for me, what's so hopeful and why he's the hope of this world is because he experienced it and then lived the process of healing. Like he has healed from every wound and every injustice. And so at least one person has done it, which means it's possible. Like there's hope and knows how to do it. And we can connect with him and learn. And I just think in my own life, like as I'm navigating through any healing journey, it's like I need vision for what the process is. And I also just need to be empowered of I can do it, because like it's about who we're becoming and we're choosing to be. And so it's not something, it's something that Christ will be there with us and will encourage us and will give us vision and empower us. And it's what like it's and we choose it and we learn how to do it. And so it's such a becoming process, so active, not passive. Shirley, feel free to jump in or correct something.
No, I love that so much. Yeah, there's that narrative in there that just speaks exactly to what you're saying. It's something that, sorry, can find it here again, but just that healing is something I can choose to do with God. And that is so powerful. It is an active thing that we can choose each day as we choose to step into the light. And that can be difficult and painful on a daily basis. And there is so much beauty and joy to be had in that process.
And maybe I can also just say, just in case any reader is thinking like, whoa, I'm hearing them use the words painful and difficult a lot.
Too much.
Like also though, no, like you build momentum too. Like as you heal, you get to bring the healing with you forward into the next part of the journey. And so I don't, and yeah, maybe Shirley, like you can speak to this as a survivor, but there were moments of like just experiencing like the freedom and the possibility that comes, that's like really motivating, maybe, is what I've heard. And helps you see like I'm not just doing this because I feel like I should. I'm doing this because I want it, because I want the beautiful life on the other end of this that has so much freedom and agency, and like where I can be the truest version of myself that I haven't even considered, and I'm even not even sure what that looks like because so much of my life I haven't even had the headspace to consider who I would be if I wasn't spending so much time managing all of the painful dynamics around me and within me.
Yeah. There is a narrative in here, and I'm struggling to find it immediately, but just speaks to, yeah, the connections that are made, just who walking in that integrity of ourselves, of our true story. There is nothing more powerful and meaningful than that. To be able to walk knowing that you feel you can trust yourself, you can trust your journey because you are walking this with God. You are not afraid of what lies ahead. It brings genuine power and confidence and integrity into your life, security. And through that, just being able to walk your life with, I can become who I want to be. I don't have to live this small version of myself. I can be who God sees in me, who I was created to be. I can fulfill all that I was created to be. And the experience of the connections that you begin to experience as you no longer feel fearful of yourself within your family, within everyone, those close to you, those who are willing to see you and want to walk this journey with you. It is truly beautiful and incredible.
So we hope that we strike the balance, and we hope we like we don't want to gaslight anyone of how intense it is. Like we want this to feel very real life because it is. And just two things are true, that they're like that it's good and it's hopeful and it's empowering and exciting too. Like, oh, actually, let me just read this one thing. This is actually a quote from C.S. Lewis but we talk about this, it comes at the end of the chapter about uncovering wounds. And when you start to like see yourself, like can feel really, really scary. And this is like maybe just a sentence. Don't be afraid of what you will learn. Don't be afraid of bringing yourself into the light. Instead, look forward to who you will become. This is the beginning of a new life. Now, at last, you are beginning chapter 1 of the great story, which no one on earth has read, which goes on forever, in which every chapter is better than the one before.
So powerful. I know that as I began walking a healing journey and looking at things, I knew there was no other way but forward. Like that quote speaks so beautifully. This was a new life. I couldn't go back. I couldn't go back to a version of just being small and minimizing myself, because I became to know that I mattered and that this journey mattered. And so there was no other way but forward and confronting things, even though it seemed scary and hard. That was the way. And doing that has and continues to bring such meaningful joy, true joy and connection and security and integrity. So
It's just a super powerful podcast, listeners. I'm going to share some comments now, and then we'll have maybe some final comments from Sage and Shirley. This is the first book that Deseret Book has published on this subject, so I'm really glad it exists. The foreword's written by Sister Roberto. I'm a friend to both of you and someone who's deeply supportive of your efforts and became aware of your efforts. This is just new content for me, listeners. I'm learning things for the first time, adding to my tools to better support others as an advocate, because we probably all have survivors of sexual abuse in our lives. So just thank you for both of you and Deseret Book for making this book possible, and all the brave people who shared their stories in your book. I'm so moved by some of the insights about how the gospel of Jesus Christ heals. You shared an experience right at the beginning of, I knew the gospel of Jesus Christ could heal people, but I didn't quite know how to put all the steps in place to have that. And listeners, I've always recognized that sin, the part of the atonement that takes away sin that sexual assault survivors didn't commit, is sort of this step-by-step process I learned as a missionary. So it was really easy for me to understand how that worked for sin. But the other part of the atonement, the one that I'm trying to understand better and that you're doing a good job of teaching us, is this taking away pain that's not our fault. And this has been one of the very best podcasts we've ever done about helping us understand that. And it's not just in its people, it's therapy. But then I think Sage said something at the end that I used to just think the atonement was something healing he gave for us, but it's partly we learn to do. And that's really powerful. And then when you talked about burn victims and Shirley talking about all the work she's done to be able to heal through the atonement, but that's really insightful. And it's sort of, so a lot of the gap between, I've had in my mind between the infinite power of the atonement and actually healing assault survivors is you've filled in so many of those dots that I, as a priesthood leader, as a father, as a friend, don't know how to fill in. And I think that's one of the beautiful parts of your ministry is to help us understand that. And it's so wonderful you do it from Shirley's standpoint as a survivor and an advocate, as Sage points out, and Sage's point as an advocate, and the role of advocates to be part of the healing process. The next thing I wrote down is something I would have thought, because I'm in my 60s, and I think I grew up in a culture that survivors somehow were partly at fault. And my brain might have first gone to what part of they are at fault for this to occur. And please, listeners, don't do what I did. Don't think that a survivor, somehow they did something and it's their fault. It's just not our doctrine. It's not what we teach. So let's don't add to people's burdens by thinking it's their fault. I love that. This was maybe Shirley's section. I didn't write down these by who said these, but you said there's so much wisdom, maybe it was Sage, and so much to learn from survivors. Wow, that's super powerful, because I probably just thought our role with survivors, just get them back to where they were before the abuse. But I think you're opening my mind that, yeah, that's part of it. But then, just like Shirley's doing firsthand, bravely sharing her story, is we can learn so much from survivors about forgiveness, about how the atonement works. And I'm thinking of this quote I read a lot on the podcast by Henry Norwin called The Wounded Healer. A minister's service will not be perceived as authentic unless it comes from a heart wounded by the suffering about which she or he speaks. The great illusion of leadership is to think others can be led to the desert by someone who's never been there. So surely you're the wounded healer. And I'm sorry you're a survivor of sexual abuse. But I'm glad that you're helping others out of this brutal desert. Sage is doing the same thing, and it's just, I don't want to excuse the abuse because now that you're a wounded healer, I don't know how to reconcile that, but I just recognize your ability to give people hope and healing is just part of the beautiful part of the atonement and part of the gospel. Then I'm reading, every survivor needs to have a sage. That was something Shirley said. And I just think each of us can be that advocate that we don't, we don't need to go to school to do that. We can just read a book like this and better learn how to mourn, bear, and comfort. I love this section on anger is an indicator emotion. It's taken me a while to get to that point because I thought just good Latter-day Saints that went to the temple all the time didn't have anger. And I think culturally we've muted anger, and I don't think that's been a good thing. But you find a balance there that it is an indicator emotion to help us understand. We had a guy on the podcast who's an anesthesiologist, and he talks about from a doctor's standpoint, when the body hurts, it's our friend to tell us things that need to be addressed. And he talked about church culture. Sometimes when people have different difficult church experiences, and kind of said when people open up about pain, in that case, church-generated pain, look at it as our friend to understand something perhaps that we can do better at. But I just love what you talked about anger, and I've learned to validate anger in other people, but then you have this careful balance of, at some point you have control of your anger and need to address it in a healthy, thoughtful way. This chapter on forgiveness is just really beautiful. And I wrote down in my notes the principles you're sharing right now scale to other situations that are part of the woundingness of the world where we need to forgive other people. And then you had some just home run moments like you can forgive and still have boundaries. And then I wrote down, I can't remember the context, not, dismissing hurt. Yeah, you can forgive and still honor hurt. So you do these things where both things are true. And just much more mature, thoughtful, insightful approach to forgiveness without sort of muting our own personal journey to heal and I thought that was just terrific. And it just scales. There's so much wounding that comes into our lives. So I'm going to go read that chapter. I've got the book in front of me, listeners, and I've skimmed it, but I'm going to go read that chapter. And I invite other podcast hosts to get these two women on their podcast. More people need to hear about their story in this book. I want to ask a tender question to Shirley, and this may help other survivors. At some point, you got married. You're married, and you wanted to open up to your spouse about being a survivor of sexual abuse. Were you worried that as you opened up to your spouse, that he might think differently? And what did he say that was helpful? And what advice, you don't have to remember all this, what advice would you give to other single, Latter-day Saints that are survivors but are worried that their future spouse might treat them or look at them differently?
Yeah.
It's a tender question, but I think you can handle it, Shirley.
Richard, thank you that is a beautiful question. Interesting for me, I actually shared with my spouse before we were married. And I would say at that point in my life, I did not appreciate or understand the repercussions or the ramifications or the reality of what that would look like. I think I, in a lot of ways, had lived my life feeling like my successes meant I wasn't impacted. And so it really came as I was in these tender roles and maybe some of that outward position or status, I lost that in moving and getting married and, being done with school, all of those things that were filling my life before. And was confronted with a lot of things I did not love about who I was as a wife and a mother. And I would say for my sweet husband that he has been a gift he is not a survivor, but also wounded, also difficult things in his upbringing and background. And he's been a gift in being willing and wanting to walk this journey with me, his own healing journey, and learning and living the principles himself. And so it hasn't been necessarily, I will say too, that what a gift he has given me is to be an advocate for me in certain situations when I wasn't seen and couldn't be seen by the people close to me. He could sit there and see me and advocate for me and say, no, this is wrong. You matter and your experience matters. And that was vitally important to me coming to see that and understand that about myself, that I was worth standing up for. I was worth saying boundaries are important. I was worth all of that process. And he has been a really significant part of helping me to live and feel that.
It's beautiful. That's I love just the vulnerability, honesty, the trust that's present in your marriage, and being an advocate for each other. And some of the most healthy marriages I'm aware of is where people are just able to open up about the realities of their
Yeah.
lives and be, and often that's helpful in the dating process to open up and really understand who each other are. And sometimes it takes courage to open up about painful chapters in our
Yeah.
lives. And often that can improve the foundation of a marriage. Vulnerability brings vulnerability, which leads to trust, honesty, support. And that was a beautiful answer, Shirley. I don't know if Sage, as you're working with people, you probably address, you can talk about this question or anything you want to talk about.
Yeah, well, first, can I just respond quickly to you were talking about maybe as a bishop, you may want to, um, I think you said the words like blame or like what was the survivor
Yeah.
responsible for this in some way? And
Yeah. That's where my mind would go
yeah,
sometimes
and
for some
I just
reason.
wanted to address that because a lot of the times we don't have a lot of education generally in our world and in our Latter-day Saint community, we're not too different around our bodies. And so a lot of people, I know a lot of survivors who did not know, for example, that sexual arousal is an autonomic response, which means that it happens automatically in response to a touch, a sound, a scent, our senses. And so I know a lot of survivors who believe that they were a part of it, that they who were manipulated sometimes by the perpetrator to believe that they wanted the abuse because they felt arousal, for example, um, or didn't understand consent. Like I think oftentimes bishops probably their experience is not that someone is coming in and saying, I'm a survivor of sexual abuse. They're probably stumbling over their words and they're unsure and they're probably blaming themselves. It's kind of blaming yourself is a protective mechanism because if you can find something wrong that you did, you can prevent that from ever happening again and you can make the world safe again.
Mm.
It's not accurate or true. And I think our brains are designed to try and help the world be safe for us. And so if there's a bishop or stake president or leader or a young women's leader, like anyone listening, um, before jumping in, especially if someone is stumbling over their words and doesn't quite seem sure of themselves, just maybe take a little more time to clarify and even to teach. Teach a little bit about consent, teach a little bit about our bodies and how our bodies respond. Another autonomic response is fight, flight, or freeze. And so a lot of times we're so eager to say, well, did you kick? Did you run? Did you scream? Why didn't you tell anyone? And what the survivor is hearing with all those questions sometimes is, ah, I could have stopped this. Why didn't I do this? And they start to feel, and we talk about this in the book, huge distrust in their body. Like, why didn't my body respond by kicking and screaming? Or why didn't I go tell someone? And that's a wound that of distrust that we need to heal of like, actually, your body responded in a way to keep you alive. Like your
Mm.
body sensed danger and responded in the way it felt was best for survival, which is how our bodies are like beautifully designed to function. And so anyways, a bishop or a stake president or any leader could read more. We talk about this science too, and um, but just really being careful to make sure you're understanding the situation before jumping in because we like I know survivors who have gone through the repentance process believing that they were at fault, and that's not healing for anybody. Um, because it's incorrect. It's not the truth. So it's really hard. It's really hard, but that's why I wanted to respond. And then this one more thing I wanted to respond to about when you were asking Shirley the question about like what made a difference. And I think um, let me just read one sentence from if we as a community, as community members want to truly show up for survivors of sexual abuse in Christ-like ways, we have to join them in the healing journey. Rather than looking down on survivors and their woundedness, this is a letter I write, I'm in it with them as an equal, a fellow child of God, a fellow sojourner in the fallen world embarking on a personal healing journey. We drew, and you'll hear this in our language, we drew a lot from Terrell and Fiona Gibbons' work of healing as woundedness and our need for healing. And um how you feel like you want to respond to a survivor can teach you a lot about yourself. Maybe I
Hmm.
could just share a couple examples. If you hear someone's experience and you immediately want to, these are all things that I've done. So I'll just say, here are ways that I've reacted to my own wounds: minimizing someone's experience, avoiding confronting pain, blaming, judging and distancing myself with thoughts like this would never be a situation I would find myself in, feeling defensive or insecure when someone has shared their pain with me, and dismissing someone's efforts to seek healing or impatiently pressuring them to heal faster, which I understand as a selfish reaction to end my own discomfort. Um, we can learn a lot if we can be self-reflective about ourselves and um, learn more about our own wounds that we all have, because we all live in a fallen world and we are all interacting with imperfect people, by the ways that we want to react instead of respond. Like, are we fully embracing and honoring the survivor's agency, or are we trying to pressure and manipulate and make something help us move past it or heal faster, instead of really honoring someone's timeline? And so for me, I was thinking probably the best thing any of us can do is see ourselves more honestly and join our own healing journey. Because the minute we start to be on our own healing journeys, it just totally shifts your perspective of like, whoa, these people are so courageous and they're so strong. And they are doing something that I am really struggling to do with on like an elementary school level, and they're in AP classes because healing is really, really hard. And sometimes, I mean, there's plenty of space for everyone to be having a hard time, but in some simple interactions, it's really hard. And for me. And so I just have a lot more admiration for the complexity and the courage. And so that would be my just kind of maybe thought in response to your question, is to see yourself more honestly and see ourselves. I am including myself in this. And we can learn a lot about ourselves by how we want to interact with others.
That was a really great segment from both of you. I wrote down in my notes, I wish you had came to my YSA bishop training like the first month and spoke right for an hour to us. And or for me, I can't speak for the other bishops, but I've learned so much about this subject, and even just the factual discussion about sexual arousal and just normal body responses that that aren't sin related and doesn't make the sexual assault okay. I love you talk about consent, listeners, and in the book there's a whole appendix defining consent in this book, so I encourage us all to read that. Um, you also talked earlier that I just want to come back to, that just you talked about worth doesn't change if we're survivors of sexual assault. I think that is our doctrine, that our heavenly parents love us. That's not an earned transaction, and there's no sin involved here. So we may feel bad or at first or feel like it's partly our fault, which isn't right, and wonder how our heavenly parents feel about us. But our doctrine is that they love us, and that love is not earned. It's not a transaction, and they're there, and they want to be with us in our most difficult moments. Even when we may not feel like we can love ourselves, they completely love us, and that's part of our doctrine for healing. Here's another question. I'm thinking of survivors that are reluctant to, like, they look at Shirley, and Shirley's open and now written a book and come on a podcast, but they just feel they can't do that. They're not even sure they can tell anybody about, and they may feel shame because they don't have the courage to open up to anybody, but they still want to be healed. Is that possible? Or do you need to open up to a therapist or a trusted loved one and just talk to those that are feeling, I'm just not sure I can be public with anybody about what happened to me?
Sage, I can start and you can add anything that you want. I was just thinking, Richard, that I might ask myself, what am I afraid of? What is it that I don't want to speak to? Like what's holding me back? Why? And I, for sure, I mean, again, I've been in this for a long time. And also, my path is not everyone's path. Absolutely. That is so true. And each person will find their healing in their own way. What is important is understanding and not being afraid of yourself or your experience. So if you're asking, why am I afraid to share this? There may be perfectly, you know, absolutely valid, reasonable reasons, and you can trust yourself in those responses. You can trust in the timing. It may take more time for you to get there, and you may find a way that feels best to you that is in writing things personally, holding your own, um, your own sacred place that you can really come to see and value yourself and your experience. That's what I feel like is important, is not being afraid of looking at the experience. And I can say that that was very hard. It was hard for me to see myself because I had been so cultured into this framing of taking care of other people's experiences. And so it required someone else to see me, to see my value. That was needed for me in my experience. But there's no pressure for a timeline or that something has to happen right now. You can trust your body, you can trust yourself, and always knowing that you are worth it. You are worth whatever that step is for you today and tomorrow. And you can trust that process.
Yeah, I love what Shirley said. As Shirley was talking, I was thinking about, and I don't think we mentioned this, though we've talked about it a lot. We tried to create kind of a framework, actually, and a group of survivors and other women. Raina was a part of that group, helped us kind of discover this framework when we were doing research for the book. A framework of thinking about healing in concrete terms. Because you can talk about healing, it's like, what does that even mean? Like, what's the outcome here? Like, how would I know if I'm healing? And so the framework that we use is a framework of connection. So every wound disconnects us in some way, disconnects us from ourselves, from our bodies, from God, from others. And healing is creating connection to ourselves, creating connection with God, creating connection with others. And so as we heal, we experience more connection and belonging. And I think, and this is such a good question, Richard, because there is a lot of fear in sharing one story because of the fear of rejection, like of not belonging. I think a lot, this is just like a sentence from a chapter about speaking the truth. And we fear that we are too much or not enough. Fear that we will not be loved or accepted if others knew the real us. Without the freedom to acknowledge the full truth, we cannot fully know the other person or be known, and we cannot experience true belonging. I think maybe the thought that came to my mind, and I just want to underscore everything Shirley said, that's not a pressure thing of like, you have to share with everyone right now. Not at all. That's not like, you'll know. And trust is built. And so there may be people you share with and people you don't share with, who you've not, like, where there's not that trust in a relationship. And this is why a connection to God can be so powerful. It's because it is a space to be your full self and your full authentic self. But I just think people may find a transformation through the healing journey of it being something that they actually want to share because they're proud to be on the healing journey.
Wow,
And
love that.
so proud of who they're becoming through this process of leaning in and having done something really hard and really transformative that is like earth-changing work. Like when like this for me is like when we change ourselves and we heal, like that's how we heal as a human family. And ultimately our goal is to all be connected together as a human family with our heavenly parents and our brother, Jesus Christ. I feel like that was missing at the end.
We're just so grateful for these women listeners. We've gone a little longer, but I just felt impressed to go longer because I personally am learning a lot of new things, and your answer is just beautiful. And the way you role model each other and support each other is just beautiful. role modeling for all of us as we interact with each other. So I could probably go on for another 30 minutes, but I'm not, listeners. I have a haircut appointment. At my age, I guess I'm just glad to have a hair. But in the show notes, we'll link to healingaftersexualabuse.com. And Shirley and Sage have set that website up so you can contact them. There's, I think, an email there, and they'd love to hear your story and engage with you. We'll also, you can get to their book from there. You can also, in the show notes, we'll link to Amazon and Deseret Book. Grateful for all of you that are part of the book. This is not, that are listening to this podcast and you're part of this book. Thank you for your efforts and your courage and the things that you shared with our listeners. And I just encourage you, even if we're not connected to this space, my thinking is this book would help us all to understand this space if we need to have tools to prepare in the future, because we're all going to be faced with loved ones or people we care about that are walking this road, or just the principles that scale to other areas that we just want better tools to bear, mourn, and comfort. So I'm so grateful this book exists. And any closing comments, Sage and Shirley? And Shirley, I'm going to miss-say your last name again, so you're going to have to... It's Sage
Washenko, you're wonderful.
Washenko. That's not that hard. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I just would love to bear witness of the Savior. Richard, I appreciate you acknowledging all of the contributors. I know I have been so blessed by those who have contributed to this book, and other survivors who have taught me and stood with me, and it is such a strengthening, meaningful thing. But just want to, in my closing letter, I just say the invitation to feel and know the Savior and experience his healing power is an invitation to each one of us, including to me and to you. And as we come and receive his healing power through choosing to live the principles of healing he taught, exemplified, and made possible for us, we can be witnesses of him. Just as our journey to see and feel and know the Savior is done one by one, so is his work of healing. And it's done one by one. There's not a set cookie cutter process of this, but he is there inviting us to, just like he did with the Nephites, which Raina shares in the foreword, Sister Alberto shares in the foreword, but he's there inviting us to come and see and touch and feel so that we can bear witness of him. And that is the fruit of healing, is being able to be united together, witnessing of Jesus Christ and of the change he has wrought in us.
What I would add, or just end with, is just that this is the beginning. This is an introduction. There's probably more, there's definitely more for us to learn. And actually, if I could just read a sentence from the beginning, where we've written directly to survivors, regardless of your age, gender, culture, or nationality, we hope that as you read, you'll feel and know that you're not alone and that you can heal. And then a little later down, the wisdom you gain on your healing journey is important information that can help all of us, individually and collectively, receive more inspiration about how to heal from the many wounds experienced by the human family. There's still so much for us to learn. This is just the beginning. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge, I don't know if you have international listeners, but we're an international church and an international people, actually. I would like to maybe say like a Latter-day Saint community at the end. And we need more survivors' experiences from around the world of all genders and ages. Like, we need to learn from your experiences. Working with, like, I can think that I understand a principle of the gospel of Jesus Christ and I can know how to live it in my life. But if it doesn't work in specific situations, then I haven't quite gotten there yet. Like, it really pushes me to learn more. Okay, how do I really apply this that would work in different situations? And the afterword is a compilation of letters from survivors directly to the reader. And it includes different genders. It includes male survivor voices too. I love that you include that in the introduction. And I do want to acknowledge that they're United States and Canada citizens, but we I think about our international brothers and sisters a lot too, and have learned a lot from you, and hope that and know that like the healing process and journey is going to include everyone's voice and experience. And so I just wanted to reach out virtually as um, saying that we know that you're there and you have important wisdom to share too, an important voice to be heard, um, and and real life experiences to be honored too. And so, yeah, just probably my core belief is that we're a human family, and so um, that's kind of what I wanted to end with. Is for anyone reading this and feeling like, hopefully, people feel like this is um, just the start. There's more to bring to light and more healing to come.
Thank you, Sage Williams and Shirley Washenko, and our listeners. Please, thank you for listening, and thank you in advance for sharing this podcast with others and your efforts to help us better support, love, and help each other as saints and beyond. And I'm grateful for these women sharing their story. So this is Richard Osler signing off from another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love.